Story number 1. The Last Guest at Blackwood Cabin, 1980. We should have never gone to Blackwood Cabin. That's what I keep telling myself over and over again as I sit here, trying to piece together everything that happened. But the truth is, we had no idea what we were walking into. It was just supposed to be a weekend getaway. Me, Kevin, and Jason, 3 best friends, getting out of the city, away from the noise, the stress, the expectations. We just wanted to drink, tell old stories, and pretend for a few nights that we were still the same reckless kids we used to be. Kevin found the cabin online, some old rental tucked deep in the Montana woods, far from the main roads. Perfect for disconnecting, the listing had said. I should have been more suspicious when the owner didn't ask too many questions, didn't even take a deposit, just gave us a location and an old key in the mailbox. But I ignored it. We all did. We arrived a late Friday evening. The road leading up to the cabin was barely a road at all, just a dirt trail cutting through towering pines. The place looked exactly like the pictures, rustic, isolated, and surrounded by nothing but darkness. No cell service, no Wi-Fi, just an old landline inside that barely worked. Kevin was thrilled. "This is perfect," he said, slapping Jason on the back. The first night was normal. We grilled steaks, drank whiskey, and played poker by candle light. At some point, Jason went outside to piss, and when he came back, he looked off. "I swear I just saw someone in the trees," he muttered, grabbing another beer. We laughed it off. Of course, the woods felt eerie at about night bursts. That was part of the fun. Around 2 a.m., I went to the bathroom. That's when I noticed it, the old leather-bound journal sitting on the dusty wooden shelf above the toilet. It looked ancient, kind of thing left behind by previous guests. Out of curiosity, I flipped it open. The handwriting was old-fashioned, but legible. March 14th, 1979, they don't let you leave. Not once you've stayed the night. If you find this, God help you. You need to... The entry cut off. The next few pages were torn out. I felt a shiver crawl down my spine, but I convinced myself it was just some old prank left behind to spook future visitors. I closed the book, used the bathroom, and went back to bed, pushing the uneasy feeling down. The next morning, Kevin woke up first and went outside to make coffee. When Jason and I stepped out, he was standing by the porch, staring at something in the trees. "Did one of you go walking last night?" he asked. Jason and I both shook our heads. Kevin pointed. That's when we saw them. Footprints in the dirt, circling the cabin. Deep, heavy prints like someone had been walking barefoot all night. "Maybe it was an animal," Jason offered weakly, but we all knew better. We tried to shake it off, but the tension was growing. That afternoon, we hiked a few miles into the woods, trying to clear our heads. The deeper we went, the quieter it became. No birds, no wind, rustling the trees, just silence. That's when Jason stopped abruptly. "Guys, tell me you see that." Up ahead, nailed to a tree, was a single Polaroid photo. It was old, the edges yellowed with time, but the image was clear. 3 men standing in front of a cabin. Our cabin. They looked just like us. Same height, same builds, even wearing clothes eerily similar to ours. But their faces, something was wrong. Their eyes were dark, hollowed out like they had been burned away. "Okay, we're leaving," I said immediately. But when we turned back, the path looked different, as if the trees had shifted while we weren't looking. The hike back felt longer, as if we were walking in circles. When we finally found the cabin, the sun was already setting. We locked the doors. Jason checked his phone again, even though we already knew no signal. Then the scratching started. At first it was faint, almost like branches tapping against the walls, but as the hours passed it grew louder, more insistent, scratching, then dragging, as if something was moving just outside. I grabbed the old journal from the bathroom and flipped through it frantically. One of the later entries caught my eye. April 2nd, 1979. We tried to run. The road is gone. They won't let us leave. The faces, they take the faces. A sharp knock on the door made me jump. "Don't answer it," Kevin hissed. We stood frozen, barely breathing. Another knock, and then a voice. "Let me in." It was my voice. I felt my stomach drop. Kevin looked at me, wide-eyed. We both knew. I hadn't spoken. Jason gripped my arm. "Get away from the door," he whispered. The knocking continued. Then the doorknob twisted. Something was trying to get in. I don't remember sleeping that night. We stayed huddled together in the living room, barely speaking. By sunrise, the knocking had stopped. But we weren't safe. We packed our things. "Screw the deposit," Kevin muttered. "We're getting out of here." That's when we saw it. Out on the porch, 3 sets of footprints leading into the woods, identical to ours. We ran to the car. Jason turned the key. The engine sputtered. "Come on," he whispered desperately, turning the key. Again, a shadow moved at the edge of the trees. A figure. No, 3 figures. They stood there watching us. My heart pounded. They were too far away to make out the details, but I already knew. They had our faces. Jason turned the key one last time, and the engine roared to life. He slammed on the gas, and we peeled out, kicking up gravel behind us. We didn't stop driving until we reached the nearest town. At a diner, shaking, we tried to explain to a local what had happened. The waitress just frowned. "Blackwood Cabin?" she asked, glancing at the old man behind the counter. His expression darkened. "That place burned down in 1980, he said. "Killed the 3 men inside." I felt the blood drain from my face. "Number, that's not possible. We were just there." The old man shook his head. "Son, that cabin doesn't exist anymore. And if you were there..." His voice trailed off, and he swallowed hard. "You better pray they don't come looking for what belongs to them." We never spoke about it again. None of us have ever gone back. But sometimes, late at night, when the world is quiet, I swear I can hear it. A knock at my door, and my own voice whispering, "Let me in." Story number 2. The Girl in the Woods, 1999. The first time my daughter saw her, we were deep in the Oregon woods, setting up camp for the weekend. It was the summer of 1999, a warm July evening, and the air smelled of pine and damp earth. Sarah, my 6-year-old, had never been camping before. She was excited, running between the trees, picking up sticks and giggling as my wife, Emily, and I set up the tent. "Daddy, there's a girl in the woods," Sarah said suddenly. I looked up from the fire pit I was building. She was standing a few feet away, pointing toward the thick trees beyond our campsite. "Where?" I asked, squinting. Sarah tilted her head. "Right there. She's smiling at me." I exchanged a glance with Emily. The nearest trailhead was miles away, and we hadn't seen a single soul since we drove in. I walked over and knelt beside Sarah. "Honey, there's no one there." Sarah frowned. "She's right in front of you." A cold shiver ran down my spine, but I forced a smile. Maybe she's your imaginary friend? Sarah didn't laugh. She just kept staring into the woods, her little face serious. She's not imaginary. She says she used to live here. I felt a strange discomfort settle in my stomach. I knew kids had wild imaginations, but something about the way Sarah said it, so matter-of-factly, unnerved me. Okay, I said, brushing it off. Come help me with the firewood. For the rest of the evening, Sarah kept glancing into the woods, as if expecting someone to step out. Emily and I tried to ignore it, chalking it up to the overactive mind of a 6-year-old. But as night fell, things got worse. We were roasting marshmallows when Sarah suddenly whispered, "She wants to come sit with us." Emily and I both froze. I swallowed. "Sarah, who's she?" "The girl," she said like it was obvious. Emily forced a chuckle. "Sweetheart, there's nobody there." Sarah's face darkened. "She says you don't believe me. She's sad." A breeze rustled through the trees, making the shadows dance. I felt goosebumps rise on my arms, despite the fire. "Maybe it's time for bed," I said, standing up. Sarah pouted, but didn't argue. She climbed into the tent, and we tucked her into her sleeping bag. But just as I was zipping up the tent flap, she whispered, "She says she'll visit me in my dreams." I barely slept that night. The next morning, Sarah was quiet. She picked at her breakfast, her usual bubbly energy gone. Emily and I exchanged worried glances but didn't press her. As we were cleaning up, Sarah suddenly stood up and ran toward the woods. "Sarah," I called after her. She didn't stop. I dropped everything and sprinted after her, my heart pounding. She was fast, too fast for a 6-year-old. I pushed through the dense brush, branches scratching at my arms, until I finally caught sight of her standing in a small clearing, perfectly still. She was staring at something. I followed her gaze and felt my breath catch in my throat. An old, half-buried gravestone sat in the middle of the clearing, moss creeping over its edges. The writing was faded, but I could make out the name, Eleanor Parker. Born 1891, died 1899, 8 years old. "Sarah," I said, my voice shaking. "How did you find this?" She turned slowly, her eyes blank, almost distant. She showed me. A sharp chill went through my body. I grabbed Sarah's hand. "We're going back to the tent. Now." She didn't resist, but as I led her away, I swear I heard a faint giggle behind me. That night, Sarah refused to sleep in her sleeping bag. She sat up, staring at the tent walls, listening to something I couldn't hear. "She's outside," Sarah whispered. Emily squeezed my hand, her grip tight. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. "Honey, we're in the middle of the woods. There's no one here." Sarah's lips trembled. "She says she used to have a family, but they left her here. They never came back." Something tapped against the tent. Emily let out a small gasp. I reached for the flashlight and clicked it on. The beam cut through the darkness inside the tent, but outside, the tapping started again. 3 soft knocks. Sarah giggled. Not her usual laugh. Something else. Something wrong. "She wants to come inside." I grabbed Sarah and held her close, trying to ignore the way her body suddenly felt. Cold. Too cold. "She says you have to let her in," Sarah whispered. The knocking grew louder. I made a decision. I grabbed Emily's hand and whispered, "We're leaving. Now." We moved fast. I threw open the tent, grabbed the car keys, and carried Sarah while Emily grabbed the essentials, The fire had gone out, leaving only embers glowing in the dark. The knocking stopped, but the woods were too quiet. I didn't look back. I strapped Sarah into the car, my hands shaking. Emily jumped into the passenger seat and I started the engine. As we pulled out, Sarah turned to the window and waved. "She says she understands," she murmured, "but she's lonely." We drove for hours, not stopping until we reached a motel near Portland. Sarah was asleep by the time we checked in. And for the first time since we arrived at that cursed campsite, I felt like I could breathe. But then, as Emily was washing up, Sarah shifted in her sleep. And in the dim motel light, I heard her whisper, "She followed us." We left Oregon the next day and never looked back. We never spoke of that weekend again. But sometimes, even now, I wake up in the middle of the night to a strange sound. 3 soft knocks. And I wonder if she's still waiting. Story number 3, trapped in the motel room, 2020. I checked into the motel just after 11 p.m., exhausted from the 8-hour drive. It wasn't a planned stop. I had been aiming for Phoenix, but the storm rolling in had other ideas. The rain had been relentless, hammering down on my windshield like something furious. When I saw the flickering neon sign for the Sunset Pines Motel, I took the exit without thinking twice. The place was exactly what you'd expect. A small, run-down, single-story building with faded yellow walls and a lobby that smelled like stale coffee and disinfectant. The man at the front desk barely looked up as he handed me the key. "Room 206, he muttered. I nodded and stepped back into the rain, my duffel bag slung over my shoulder. The parking lot was nearly empty, save for an old pickup truck with mud-caked tires. I found my room at the far end of the row, the door paint peeling, the number barely hanging onto the wood. Inside, the room was suffocatingly still. A single lamp cast a dim glow over a floral bedspread, the kind that felt sticky no matter how clean it was. The air conditioner rattled weakly, fighting against the heavy humidity. The rain outside made everything feel smaller, pressing in against the walls. I locked the door behind me, twisting the deadbolt twice. I was asleep within minutes. I woke up to scratching. At first, I thought it was part of my dream, the sound blending with the rain outside, but then it grew sharper, more deliberate. It was coming from the door. I sat up, my pulse hammering in my throat. My phone screen glowed in the darkness. 3:14 a.m. For a few seconds, I just listened. The scratching stopped. I exhaled slowly, trying to shake the lingering unease, probably just the wind rattling the frame. I lay back down, pulling the blanket up to my chest. The room felt colder now. Click. The doorknob twisted. I bolted upright, my stomach flipping. The deadbolt was still locked. I could see it from where I sat. But the knob, it was turning, not just jiggling, but actually turning, like someone on the other side was testing it. I reached for my phone, about to call the front desk, when something else caught my attention. The bathroom door was open. I was sure I had left it closed. I stared at the dark gap, my breath catching in my throat. The air inside looked too dark, like the shadows inside were thicker than they should be. I forced a laugh, trying to shake the ridiculous fear creeping up my spine. I was overtired, that was all. My brain playing tricks on me. Then I saw the reflection. The bathroom mirror faced the bed, its surface dull with age but clear enough. And in that mirror, I saw something move. Not me. I froze. The shape was wrong. Too tall. Too still. Standing just inside the bathroom doorway. I didn't turn around. I couldn't. I grabbed my phone, flicking on the flashlight, and aimed it at the mirror. The moment the light hit the glass, the shape vanished. And then the door slammed shut. I jumped out of bed so fast I nearly tripped. My heart was beating so hard it hurt. I backed up to the front door, fumbling with the lock, yanking at the handle, but the door wouldn't budge. I threw my weight against it. Nothing. The room pressed in on me. The air thickened. My own reflection in the TV screen looked distorted, stretched. Wrong. I turned back to the bathroom door. It was still closed, but I could hear something behind it, breathing. Slow, shallow, not mine. I grabbed my duffel bag and swung it at the door, slamming it against the wood. "Who's in there?" My voice came out shaking, barely a whisper. Silence, then knocking, software, even, from inside the bathroom. I took a step back, my hands shaking. "Who's there?" A pause. Then, in a voice that sounded exactly like mine, "Let me out." I think I stopped breathing. My body locked up, ice spreading through my veins. It wasn't possible. It wasn't me. I scrambled for my phone, dialing 911. No service. The motel Wi-Fi was useless. I turned back to the door and the knocking stopped. The handle began to turn. I didn't stay to find out what was inside. I grabbed my bag and went for the window. It was stiff. The frame warped from age, but I yanked until it gave way. I threw myself outside into the rain, tumbling onto the pavement. My car was still there, only a few feet away. I ran. I didn't even check out. Didn't look back. I just drove. It wasn't until I reached the city limits that I pulled over, hands still trembling against the wheel. My pulse was erratic, my mind racing. It wasn't real. It couldn't have been real. And then my phone buzzed. A single notification from an unknown number. "You left the door open." I stared at the screen, my entire body cold. Slowly, I turned to look at the back seat. Empty. I hit the gas and never stopped driving. I still don't know what happened in that motel room. But sometimes, late at night, I wake up to knocking. And I know I'll never go back. Story number 4. The Lake House That Vanished, 1975. We shouldn't have gone back to that lake. It was supposed to be a quiet weekend away. Just me, my brother Danny, and our 2 friends, Mark and Charlie. We were all in our early 20s then, full of reckless confidence, thinking nothing bad could ever happen to us. Mark had inherited an old family lake house in northern Michigan, a place his grandfather had built in the 1930s. It had been abandoned for years, but Mark wanted to check it out. Maybe fix it up. A free weekend at a lakeside house? We didn't need much convincing. We arrived on a warm August afternoon. The road leading to the house was barely a road at all, just a narrow, overgrown path cutting through thick pine trees. When we finally pulled up, the lake stretched out before us, glistening under the sun. The house itself was simple. 2 stories, old wooden siding, a wide front porch with steps leading straight to the water. It felt forgotten. Mark unlocked the front door, and a strange smell hit us immediately. Dust, damp wood, something else I couldn't quite place. It wasn't unpleasant, just old. The inside was cluttered with relics of the past. Faded curtains, a rusting lantern on the fireplace mantel, stacks of yellowed newspapers from decades ago. That first night, we drank beer on the dock, telling stories and skipping rocks across the water. The sky was clear, the air still. It was peaceful, but something felt wrong. It started with the noises. Around midnight, when the house had gone silent, I heard something moving outside, a soft rustling, like footsteps on the grass. I sat up listening. Then came the sound of water. Slow, deliberate splashes, like someone wading through the shallows. I nudged Danny, who was snoring in the bed across from mine. "Do you hear that?" He mumbled something and rolled over. I walked to the window and looked out. The lake was still. Too still. Like the water was holding its breath. Then I saw them. Wet footprints on the dock, leading from the water. I froze, my pulse hammering. I grabbed the flashlight and stepped outside, my breath coming in shallow bursts. The footprints were fresh, glistening under the light. They stopped halfway up the dock, like whoever made them had just says. I didn't sleep much that night, and the next morning I didn't mention what I saw. Maybe I had imagined it, maybe it was just paranoia from being in an unfamiliar place, and at noon Mark decided we should take the rowboat out, explore the lake. We paddled toward the center, the house shrinking behind us. The deeper we went, the quieter it became. No birds, no wind, just silence. Then Mark frowned. "Where's the road?" We all turned. The dirt road we had driven in on. The only way in or out of the property was gone. At first, we thought it was just the angle, that we were looking at it wrong. But we paddled closer to shore, and the trees had shifted. The house looked different. The dock was gone. The house was still there, but it wasn't ours. The wood was darker, more weathered. The porch was missing. The windows were broken. Danny swallowed hard. "Guys, are we in the right spot?" We rowed faster, our oars cutting through the water. But as we reached the shore, my stomach turned. It wasn't Mark's house. It looked older, more decayed. The boards were warped, the roof partially caved in. We climbed out, stepping onto the muddy ground. Everything was wrong. Mark ran ahead and pushed open the door. Inside, the furniture was covered in dust. Cobwebs stretched across the ceiling. The newspapers on the table weren't from the 50s anymore. They were from 1923. "What the hell's going on?" Charlie whispered. I turned back toward the lake, and that's when I saw it. Another boat. A few yards away, half sunken near the shore, was a wooden rowboat, rotted, ancient, and inside, 4 skeletons. My stomach lurched. The bones were twisted, tangled together, and their clothes, ripped, faded scraps, looked eerily familiar, like ours. Charlie gagged. Danny took a step back, his face pale. This isn't real. It's a prank, right?" Mark shook his head, his hands trembling. "We need to get out of here." We ran back to our boat and pushed off, paddling harder than we ever had in our lives. The water resisted us, as if it didn't want us to leave. But finally, after what felt like hours, we reached the middle of the lake again. The house stood before us. Our house. The dock was back. The road visible again. Danny let out a shaky laugh. Did we imagine that?" None of us answered. That night, I couldn't sleep. My body was exhausted, but my mind wouldn't stop racing. Around 3 a.m., I heard it again. The footsteps. Only this time, they were inside the house. The floorboards creaked outside my room. Then came the soft knock. I pulled the covers over my head, my body rigid. The knock came again, then the doorknob twisted. The door slowly creaked open. I squeezed my eyes shut, then water dripping. A puddle formed beside my bed. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I just listened. A whisper right against my ear. "You were never supposed to leave." I don't remember the rest of that night. I must have blacked out. At sunrise, we packed up and left, without a word. None of us spoke during the drive back. Our faces pale, our bodies numb. We never talked about it again. Mark sold the house. We never went back. But sometimes, late at night, I dream of the lake, of the house that wasn't ours, of the footprints on the dock, and I wake up to the sound of water dripping. Story number 5. Whispers at Devil's Creek, 1983. We should have never camped at Devil's Creek. It was the summer of 1983. I had just come out to my friends, Lisa and Eric, about being transgender, and they were supportive in a way I hadn't expected. They wanted to take me somewhere remote, somewhere free, where I could just exist without the weight of the world pressing down on me. That's how we ended up here, deep in the Wyoming wilderness, pitching a tent beside a narrow, winding creek that locals had warned us about. The drive had taken hours. The final stretch, a dirt path barely wide enough for Lisa's rusted-out station wagon. No signs, no markers, just endless pine trees and a single wooden bridge that creaked under the weight of our tires. The water beneath was black, slow-moving. It smelled like damp earth, old wood, something else I couldn't place. Lisa was the one who named it first. What do they call it? Devil's Creek? She asked, tossing her backpack onto the ground. Eric shrugged. Probably just a creepy name to scare off city folk like us. But I noticed the way he avoided looking at the water for too long. That first evening, we built a fire and sat around it, passing a bottle of cheap whiskey between us. The stars were sharp, the air thick with pine. It should have been peaceful, but I kept catching something in the corner of my eye. Movement along the tree line, quick, like someone ducking just out of sight. I told myself it was just nerves. Around midnight, Lisa stood up, stretching. "I have to pee," she announced, grabbing a flashlight. "If I don't come back, assume I got eaten by a bear." She wandered off toward the trees. Eric and I sat in silence for a moment, listening to the crackle of the fire. Then, from the darkness, Lisa's voice. "Guys." We turned. Her flashlight beam was shaking. Eric frowned. "What is it?" Lisa hesitated. Then, in a quieter voice, she said, "I think someone's out here." Eric and I exchanged a look before standing up. I grabbed my own flashlight and stepped toward her. The creek gurgled softly in the background, the only sound aside from the occasional rustling of the wind. "Where?" I asked. She pointed into the trees. "There. I saw someone move." I swept my flashlight across the tree line. Nothing. "You sure?" Eric asked, rubbing his arms. "Could have been a shadow." Lisa didn't look convinced. "Maybe." We walked her back to the fire, joking to lighten the mood. But when she sat down, she was quieter than before, eyes darting toward the woods. That night, I woke up to whispers. At first, I thought it was just Lisa and Eric talking in their sleep. But as my eyes adjusted to the darkness, I realized they were both still. The whispers were outside the tent. Low, constant, too many voices to count. I held my breath, my heart slamming against my ribs. I couldn't make out words, just sounds, soft, urgent, like a conversation I wasn't meant to hear. Then, a shadow moved against the tent wall. I nearly screamed. The voices stopped. I didn't move, didn't breathe. Something pressed against the fabric. Not a hand, something bigger. A shape. I squeezed my eyes shut, gripping the sleeping bag so tight my knuckles ached. Minutes passed, maybe hours. At some point I must have fallen asleep. I woke up to Lisa shaking my shoulder. "Wake up," she hissed. Her face was pale, her eyes wide. Eric was already outside, pacing. Lisa pulled me up and whispered, "We need to go." My head was spinning. "What? Why?" Eric turned toward us, his voice tight. "Because someone's been walking around our tent all night." I felt my stomach drop. We packed in record time, shoving sleeping bags and gear into the station wagon, without a word. The sun was rising, but the woods still felt wrong, like the night hadn't fully left yet. I climbed into the back seat, barely getting my door shut before Lisa peeled away, kicking up dust and gravel behind us. None of us spoke until we were back on the main road, the trees thinning, the weight in my chest easing just a little. That's when I made the mistake of looking back. Standing at the tree line just beyond the bridge were figures, too many to count. Their faces were blurred, distorted, like trying to remember a dream, but I knew they were watching us. We never spoke of Devil's Creek again. But even now, sometimes when I'm lying in bed, I still hear them whispering. Story number 6. The Airbnb that didn't exist. 2021. I booked the Airbnb on a whim. I had been driving through Texas for days, stopping at cheap motels and roadside diners, trying to put some distance between myself and everything I had left behind. When I found the listing, it seemed perfect. A cozy little farmhouse tucked away in a quiet rural town, promising solitude and fresh air. The host's name was Karen, and her profile was almost empty. No reviews. Just a short description. Peaceful retreat. Perfect for travelers looking to unwind. I was too exhausted to care. It was cheap, available, and only a few miles from where I had stopped for gas. I booked it instantly. An hour later, I was pulling up to the house. It was exactly like the pictures. A quaint white farmhouse, a wraparound porch, a rocking chair swaying gently in the evening breeze. The sun was setting behind the hills, casting long shadows across the dry grass. The key was under the mat, just like Karen had promised. Inside, the air smelled of lavender and old wood. Everything was neat, but too neat, like no one had actually lived there for a long time. There were no personal items, no photos, just generic decorations, a fireplace that looked like it had never been used, a wooden dining table set for one. A note on the counter read, "Welcome. Make yourself at home. I'll check in on you tomorrow." I tossed my bag onto the couch and sat down, stretching my legs. The silence was suffocating, but I told myself that was why I came, to be alone, to clear my head. I should have left the moment I realized there was no Wi-Fi. The listing had promised internet, but my phone refused to connect. No bars, no signal. I figured the service was just bad this deep in the countryside. I'd let Karen know in the morning. I made myself a cup of tea with the old-fashioned kettle on the stove. The wind howled outside, rattling the windows. I turned off the lights, climbed into bed, and drifted into an uneasy sleep. I woke up at 3:12 a.m. Something had woken me up. I lay still, my heart pounding, straining to hear past the ringing silence. Then I heard it. Footsteps, not inside but on the porch. Slow, deliberate. The old wooden planks groaned under their weight. I held my breath. The footsteps stopped right outside my bedroom window. I couldn't see anything through the darkness, but I could feel it. Something was standing there just on the other side of the glass, watching me. Then, after what felt like hours, the footsteps moved away. I waited until I was sure I was alone before I forced myself to sit up, muscles screaming with tension. I grabbed my phone. Still no signal. I had to get out of there. I grabbed my keys, threw on my jacket, and slipped out the back door as quietly as I could. My car was parked a few feet away. If I could just make it there, I could drive until I found service. Then I saw the porch. The rocking chair was still moving, like someone had just been sitting in it. I ran. I fumbled with my keys, hands shaking. But when I finally unlocked the car and slammed the door shut, I felt something shift in the air. The house, the entire house, was gone. My breath hitched. I blinked, rubbed my eyes, tried to force my brain to make sense of what I was seeing. But there was nothing in front of me, just an empty field stretching into the distance. No porch, no windows, no rocking chair, no house. I turned the key in the ignition. The engine roared to life. I floored it, speeding down the dirt road, my tires kicking up dust and gravel. I didn't stop until I reached a diner 10 miles away. Inside, shaking, I asked the waitress if she knew anything about an old farmhouse on the outskirts of town. She frowned. "Oh, there ain't no house out there, hon," I insisted, told her about the Airbnb, showed her the listing on my phone, but the listing was gone. The screen flashed, "Error 404, page not found." My reservation. My payment history. All of it had vanished. It was like the house had never existed. I didn't argue. I just nodded, finished my coffee, and drove until I crossed the state line. I never heard from Karen, never found that listing again. But sometimes, late at night, I dream about the house. And when I wake up, I swear I can still hear the rocking chair creaking. Story number 7. Cabin 23, 1995. We were too young and too stupid to take the note seriously. It was 1995, our last summer before college, and we wanted one last adventure before life pulled us in different directions. Mark, Danny, Jake, and I pooled our money together and rented a cabin for the weekend. The place was a small, remote lodge in Colorado, nestled deep in the woods, with no TV, no phone, and just enough isolation to make it feel like our own little world. The drive up was long, winding roads cutting through dense pine forests, the sun setting behind the mountains. When we arrived, the main office was already closed. A single envelope with Cabin 23 written on it was taped to the front door. Inside was a key and a handwritten note. "Do not stay here past midnight." We laughed. Thought it was some local's way of messing with tourists. Danny even pinned it to the fridge like a joke. The cabin was nothing special. 2 small bedrooms, a fireplace, an old wooden table in the center of the room. It smelled like damp wood and something faintly metallic, like rust. Mark cracked open the first beer. "Here's to Cabin 23, and ignoring stupid warnings." By the time the clock hit 11:30, we were buzzed, playing poker and listening to a cassette tape playing some grunge mix. None of us had even thought about leaving. Then the knocking started. It was soft at first, almost like the wind pushing a tree branch against the door. But after a few minutes, it became deliberate. 3 slow, heavy knocks. Danny smirked and stood up. "Someone's messing with us." He swung the door open. Nobody was there. The porch was empty, the trees silent. The dirt road leading up to the cabin was undisturbed. No footprints, no sign of movement. Jake frowned. "Maybe it was an animal?" Mark shrugged. "Or the wind." Danny shut the door, locking it for the first time. We kept playing, but the energy had changed. Every creak in the cabin felt louder, the air heavier. Something felt wrong. At exactly midnight, the lights flickered. Then the cassette player stopped. Then the whispers began. I thought I was imagining it at first, just the wind slipping through the cracks in the walls. But then I saw Mark's face pale, Jake's hand freeze, mid-deal. We all heard it. The sound wasn't coming from outside. It was inside the cabin. I turned slowly, my breath caught in my throat. The whispers were low, urgent, coming from the fireplace. Mark grabbed the poker stick and moved closer. "Hello?" The whispering stopped. A cold gust of air blew through the cabin, sending our cards scattering across the table. Then the fireplace roared to life. No one had lit a fire. The logs were dry, untouched, but flames erupted anyway, twisting violently. And in the glow, I saw it, a hand, a blackened, skeletal hand reaching out from the flames. A cold gust of air blew through the cabin, sending our cards scattering across the table. Then the fireplace roared to life. No one had lit a fire. The logs were dry, untouched, but flames erupted anyway, twisting violently. And in the glow, I saw it, a hand, a blackened, skeletal hand reaching out from the flames. Danny screamed. Jake backed away so fast he tripped over the couch. Mark grabbed my arm, his fingers digging into my skin. The whispers returned, louder this time, angry. I didn't think. I ran. We all did, tripping over each other to reach the door. We barely managed to fling it open before the lights exploded, plunging the cabin into complete darkness. We sprinted to the car. Mark fumbled with the keys, dropping them twice, before finally jamming them into the ignition. The engine wouldn't turn over. The whispers were in the car. I turned, my stomach lurching. In the back seat, just behind Jake, a shadow sat perfectly still, watching us. Its face was barely visible. Sunken eyes, hollow cheeks, a mouth stitched shut with something dark and glistening. Then it moved. Jake screamed as the shadow lunged. The engine roared to life. Mark slammed on the gas, and we tore down the dirt road. I didn't look back. None of us did. We didn't stop driving until we reached the first gas station 20 miles away. We piled out of the car, gasping, shaking, trying to understand what had just happened. Danny broke the silence. What the hell was that? No one had an answer. We left the cabin without checking out. We never asked for our deposit back. 2 weeks later, Mark called me in the middle of the night, his voice shaking. "I looked up that place," he whispered. "Cabin 23? My stomach clenched. It burned down in 1973, killed the 4 guys inside. I didn't ask for details. I didn't want to know. I haven't been back to Colorado since, and sometimes even now, I wake up at midnight to knocking." Story number 8. The Boy in the Basement, 1987. I should have never taken my son to that motel. It was December of 1987, and I was desperate. My wife had left me earlier that year, and I was still figuring out how to be a single father to my 8-year-old son, Ben. We had been driving cross-country to visit my sister for Christmas, but a winter storm had slowed us down. I had planned to push through the night, but when the snow thickened and the roads turned slick, I knew we had to stop. The only place for miles was a rundown roadside motel just outside of Vermont. The Green Hollow Inn. It looked abandoned, but the neon vacancy sign buzzed weakly, flickering in the cold. Inside, the front desk was dimly lit, the air stale and thick with the scent of cigarette smoke. The man behind the counter barely looked at me as he slid over a key. "Room 109, he grunted. Then, as I turned to leave, he added, "Only go downstairs." I frowned. "Or downstairs?" He tapped the counter impatiently. "No basement access. It's locked anyway. You and your boys stay put." I nodded slowly, took the key, and led Ben back out into the cold. The room was nothing special. 2 beds, a small TV, a cracked window that rattled whenever the wind howled. But it was warm. Ben immediately kicked off his boots and flopped onto the bed. "I'm hungry," he mumbled. The motel didn't have a restaurant, so I left him with the TV and went back to the car to grab some snacks from our bags. The storm had worsened, snow piling up fast against the doors. As I walked back, I noticed something. Footprints, small ones. They started near our door, leading toward the far end of the building, toward a rusted metal basement door. I stopped, The prints were fresh, barefoot. The front desk guy had said the basement was locked. Then why was the door open? Just a crack? I felt a chill. That had nothing to do with the weather. Back in the room, Ben was sitting on the floor, playing with his action figures. "Dad," he said without looking up. I saw a boy. My stomach twisted. "What?" "A boy," he repeated. He was at the window. I felt the blood drain from my face. "What do you mean?" "Outside?" Ben nodded. He waved at me, but he looked sad. I moved to the window and peered outside. The snow was undisturbed. No footprints. No sign of anyone. "Are you sure, buddy?" Ben just shrugged and went back to his toys. I tried to shake the uneasy feeling and turned on the TV to drown out the silence. The storm howled outside. Wind pushing against the glass, like something trying to get in. Then I heard it. A soft knock. Not at the door. From underneath us. I swallowed hard. It had to be the pipes. Old motels like this always made noises. But then came another knock. And another. Steady. Rhythmic. Like someone tapping from inside the floor. Ben looked up from his toys, eyes wide. "Dad," he whispered. "He's in the basement." I forced a smile, trying to keep my voice calm. "It's just the wind, bud. Go brush your teeth, okay?" Ben hesitated, then nodded and went into the bathroom. As soon as he was out of sight, I grabbed my coat and stepped outside. The snow was coming down hard, my breath fogging in the freezing air. I followed the small footprints to the basement door. It was still cracked open, a sliver of darkness behind it. I don't know why I did it. Maybe because I didn't want to be afraid. Maybe because some part of me believed there really was a boy down there. Cold, lost, needing help. I pushed the door open. The air was damp, thick with the smell of mold and something rotting. My flashlight beam cut through the dark, revealing a narrow concrete staircase leading down. The walls were lined with rusted shelves, old boxes, discarded furniture. And then I saw him. A small boy stood in the corner, facing away from me. He wore dirty, tattered pajamas, his hair matted and unkempt. "Hey, kid," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "Are you okay?" He didn't move. I stepped closer. "Do you need help?" The boy twitched. His shoulders jerked violently, unnaturally, like a puppet whose strings had been yanked. I froze. Slowly, too slowly, he turned his head. Only his head. His face was wrong. Sunken eyes, hollow cheeks, a mouth stitched shut with thick black thread. Then he lunged. I stumbled backward, crashing into a stack of boxes as my flashlight flickered. The basement groaned, not from the storm, but from something deeper, something alive. The boy's movements were jerky, unnatural, his limbs twisting as he crawled toward me. I bolted. I ran up the stairs, slamming the door shut behind me, my breath ragged. The motel hallway was empty, eerily silent except for the wind howling outside. I locked our room door and grabbed Ben, who was watching me with wide, scared eyes. "Dad, what's wrong?" I didn't answer. I grabbed our bags and threw them into the car, not caring about the snow, about the storm, about anything other than getting the hell out of there. As I turned the key, I glanced up at the motel. The front desk clerk was standing outside now, watching me. His face was unreadable. But then slowly, he lifted his hand and waved. I slammed the gas and didn't stop driving until we were 3 towns away. The next morning, I called the motel from a payphone. A woman answered. "The Green Hollow Inn?" she repeated, sounding confused. "Sir, that place burned down in 1972. I hung up. I never told Ben what happened. But sometimes, late at night, I'll hear a knock, soft, rhythmic, and I wonder if the boy in the basement ever made it out. Ben looked up from his toys, eyes wide. "Dad," he whispered. "He's in the basement." I forced a smile, trying to keep my voice calm. "It's just the wind, bud. Go brush your teeth, okay?" Ben hesitated, then nodded and went into the bathroom. As soon as he was out of sight, I grabbed my coat and stepped outside. The snow was coming down hard, my breath fogging in the freezing air. I followed the small footprints to the basement door. It was still cracked open, a sliver of darkness behind it. I don't know why I did it. Maybe because I didn't want to be afraid. Maybe because some part of me believed there really was a boy down there. Cold, lost, needing help. I pushed the door open. The air was damp, thick with the smell of mold and something rotting. My flashlight beam cut through the dark, revealing a narrow concrete staircase leading down. The walls were lined with rusted shelves, old boxes, discarded furniture. And then I saw him. A small boy stood in the corner, facing away from me. He wore dirty, tattered pajamas, his hair matted and unkempt. "Hey, kid," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "Are you okay?" He didn't move. I stepped closer. "Do you need help?" The boy twitched, his shoulders jerked violently, unnaturally, like a puppet whose strings had been yanked. I froze. Slowly, too slowly, he turned his head. Only his head. His face was wrong. Sunken eyes, hollow cheeks, a mouth stitched shut with thick black thread. Then he lunged. I stumbled backward, crashing into a stack of boxes as my flashlight flickered. The basement groaned, not from the storm, but from something deeper, something alive. The boy's movements were jerky, unnatural, his limbs twisting as he crawled toward me. I bolted. I ran up the stairs, slamming the door shut behind me, my breath ragged. The motel hallway was empty, eerily silent except for the wind howling outside. I locked our room door and grabbed Ben, who was watching me with wide, scared eyes. "Dad, what's wrong?" I didn't answer. I grabbed our bags and threw them into the car, not caring about the snow, about the storm, about anything other than getting the hell out of there. As I turned the key, I glanced up at the motel. The front desk clerk was standing outside now, watching me. His face was unreadable. But then slowly, he lifted his hand and waved. I slammed the gas and didn't stop driving until we were 3 towns away. The next morning, I called the motel from a payphone. A woman answered. "The Green Hollow Inn?" she repeated, sounding confused. "Sir, that place burned down in 1972. I hung up. I never told Ben what happened. But sometimes, late at night, I'll hear a knock, soft, rhythmic, and I wonder if the boy in the basement ever made it out. Ben looked up from his toys, eyes wide. "Dad," he whispered. "He's in the basement." I forced a smile, trying to keep my voice calm. "It's just the wind, bud. Go brush your teeth, okay?" Ben hesitated, then nodded and went into the bathroom. As soon as he was out of sight, I grabbed my coat and stepped outside. The snow was coming down hard, my breath fogging in the freezing air. I followed the small footprints to the basement door. It was still cracked open, a sliver of darkness behind it. I don't know why I did it. Maybe because I didn't want to be afraid. Maybe because some part of me believed there really was a boy down there. Cold, lost, needing help. I pushed the door open. The air was damp, thick with the smell of mold and something rotting. My flashlight beam cut through the dark, revealing a narrow concrete staircase leading down. The walls were lined with rusted shelves, old boxes, discarded furniture. And then I saw him. A small boy stood in the corner, facing away from me. He wore dirty, tattered pajamas, his hair matted and unkempt. "Hey, kid," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "Are you okay?" He didn't move. I stepped closer. "Do you need help?" The boy twitched. His shoulders jerked violently, unnaturally, like a puppet whose strings had been yanked. I froze. Slowly, too slowly, he turned his head. Only his head. His face was wrong. Sunken eyes, hollow cheeks, a mouth stitched shut with thick black thread. Then he lunged. I stumbled backward, crashing into a stack of boxes as my flashlight flickered. The basement groaned, not from the storm, but from something deeper, something alive. The boy's movements were jerky, unnatural, his limbs twisting as he crawled toward me. I bolted. I ran up the stairs, slamming the door shut behind me, my breath ragged. The motel hallway was empty, eerily silent except for the wind howling outside. I locked our room door and grabbed Ben, who was watching me with wide, scared eyes. "Dad, what's wrong?" I didn't answer. I grabbed our bags and threw them into the car, not caring about the snow, about the storm, about anything other than getting the hell out of there. As I turned the key, I glanced up at the motel. The front desk clerk was standing outside now, watching me. His face was unreadable. But then slowly, he lifted his hand and waved. I slammed the gas and didn't stop driving until we were 3 towns away. The next morning, I called the motel from a payphone. A woman answered. "The Green Hollow Inn?" she repeated, sounding confused. "Sir, that place burned down in 1972. I hung up. I never told Ben what happened. But sometimes, late at night, I'll hear a knock, soft, rhythmic, and I wonder if the boy in the basement ever made it out. Story number 10. The Motel That Watches You, 2018. I checked into the motel just before midnight. I had been driving for hours, pushing through exhaustion on my way to Phoenix for a work conference. The endless desert highways had started to blur together, and I knew I need to stop before I fell asleep at the wheel when I saw the neon sign flickering in the distance. Desert View Motel. I took the exit without thinking twice. The place was almost empty. A single car sat in the lot, its windows so caked with dust it looked like it hadn't been moved in years. The office was dimly lit, the fluorescent light buzzing overhead. The man behind the counter looked up when I entered. "You need a room?" His voice was flat, uninterested. "Yeah, just for the night." He slid a key across the counter without asking for ID or a credit card. Room 107. The key was ice cold when I picked it up. As I turned to leave, the man spoke again. "You keep your curtains closed, understand?" I hesitated. "Why?" He stared at me, expressionless. "Just do it." I forced a chuckle. "Right. Sure." The hallway smelled like stale air and old carpet. The walls were lined with framed photographs, black and white portraits of people I didn't recognize. They all looked dated, their faces frozen in time. Some stared directly into the camera, while others were caught mid-laugh or mid-conversation. The door to room 107 creaked as I unlocked it. Inside, the air was thick, musty. The bedspread was an ugly shade of brown, the kind that hid stains well. The bathroom light flickered when I turned it on, buzzing faintly. I tossed my bag onto the chair and pulled out my phone. No service. Of course. Sighing, I pulled the curtains shut, more out of habit than obedience. I had just started taking off my shoes when I noticed something strange. The framed photo on the wall. It was a black and white portrait of a man sitting on a park bench wearing an old-fashioned suit. His posture was stiff, his eyes locked onto the camera. His face looked familiar, but I couldn't place it. I turned away, shaking off the unease. I fell asleep faster than I expected. Exhaustion, overriding discomfort. I woke up to the feeling of being watched. My eyes snapped open. The room was silent, but something felt off. I turned my head toward the window. The curtains were still closed. Then I noticed the framed photo. The man wasn't sitting anymore. He was standing. His expression was the same, but his body had shifted. His stiff posture now loomed, as if he had moved closer to the camera. A cold chill ran through me. I sat up slowly, my breath shallow. I knew I was just tired. My brain was playing tricks on me. But then I noticed something else. The other framed pictures in the hallway, the ones I had passed earlier. They were different now. The people in the frames, they were all looking at my door. My body locked up. My pulse hammered in my ears. I swallowed hard and forced myself to get out of bed. I had to get out of here. I grabbed my bag and reached for the door handle. The second my fingers touched it, I heard a whisper. "Don't leave yet." I spun around, my back pressed against the door. The voice had come from inside the room. The photograph had changed again. The man was inside the motel room now. I grabbed my keys and yanked the door open, stepping into the hallway. My breath hitched. The pictures, every single one of them, had changed. The people in the frames, they were all looking at me now, their eyes wide, their mouths open, as if caught mid-scream. I bolted for the lobby. The man behind the counter didn't look surprised when I slammed the key onto the desk. "You looked, didn't you?" he muttered. I didn't answer. I just ran. The cold desert air hit me like a slap as I jumped into my car and peeled out of the lot, tires screeching. I didn't stop driving until I saw the bright lights of a gas station 20 miles away. My hands were still shaking when I stepped inside. The cashier barely glanced at me. "You all right?" I hesitated. "Do you know anything about that motel down the highway? Desert View?" The cashier frowned. "Desert View?" I nodded. His expression darkened. "That place burned down in 1989. My stomach dropped. "No," I whispered. "I was just there." The cashier shook his head. "You must be mistaken." I turned back toward the door, my pulse racing. My car was parked under a bright street lamp, the windshield reflecting the glow. And in that reflection, I saw them, the people from the photographs, standing behind me, watching. Story number 11. The Tunnel Beneath Our Cabin, 2017. We didn't know about the tunnel when we booked the cabin. It was late fall of 2017, and my wife Claire and I had been desperate for a break. Between work stress, city noise, and the overall exhaustion of life, we needed somewhere quiet, somewhere remote. Claire found the cabin listing online, a secluded place deep in the Smoky Mountains, surrounded by nothing but trees. It was perfect. And the drive up was long, winding roads, turning into barely visible dirt trails. By the time we reached the cabin, the sun was dipping below the trees, casting long shadows across the wooden porch. The air was crisp, the silence absolute. Inside was cozy. Rustic furniture, a fireplace, the scent of old wood filling the space. There was no Wi-Fi, no cell service, just the two of us and the promise of a peaceful weekend. The first night was uneventful. We cooked dinner, drank wine by the fire, and let the quiet settle over us. It wasn't until the next morning that we found the trapdoor. Claire was in the bedroom unpacking while I explored the kitchen. Near the back wall, beside the pantry, my foot caught on something. A small metal ring embedded in the floor. At first, I thought it was part of an old rug hook, but when I pulled, the floor lifted. A hidden door. Beneath it, a wooden staircase led down into darkness. I called for Claire. She stood beside me, frowning. Did the listing say anything about a basement? I shook my head. Number, and this looks older than the cabin itself. She hesitated. Maybe it's just a storage cellar? I turned on my flashlight. The stairs creaked as I stepped down, the air growing colder with every step. Claire followed close behind. At the bottom, we found a narrow tunnel. The walls were damp. The ceiling low enough that I had to duck. Old wooden beams lined the passage, some rotting, others barely holding up the weight of the earth above. Claire exhaled. What the hell is this? The tunnel stretched far into the dark, disappearing into a black void. A metal door stood at the end. I swallowed hard. Something about it felt wrong. Let's go back up, Claire whispered. I nodded. We turned, and the trap door slammed shut above us. The flashlight flickered. Claire gasped, grabbing my arm. There's no wind down here. I ran up the stairs and pushed. The door wouldn't budge. I slammed my shoulder into it. Nothing. Panic crept in. Claire grabbed my wrist. We need to get out of here. The tunnel was the only way forward. My heart pounded as we stepped toward the metal door. The closer we got, the colder the air became. My breath fogged in the dim light. I reached out and pushed. The door groaned open. Beyond it was a room, small, windowless, the walls lined with old shelves stacked with jars. Dozens of them. Claire lifted one, her face twisted. Oh my God. Inside was something floating, pale, shriveled, a human finger. I felt bile rise in my throat. I shined the light on the other jars. Some held teeth, others eyes. I turned toward Claire. We need to... A noise from deeper in the tunnel, a low, wet, dragging sound. Claire squeezed my hand so tightly it hurt. Run, she whispered. We bolted. The tunnel stretched longer than before. The wooden beams looked older, warped, almost organic. The air thickened, pressing against my skin like invisible hands. Then, footsteps. Not ours. Behind us. Fast. I didn't look back. We burst through the trap door, collapsing onto the wooden floor of the cabin. The air was warm again. The sunlight streamed through the window. The trap door was gone. The floor was solid. No ring, no seam, no sign it had ever existed. Claire turned to me, face pale. Did we imagine that? I pulled out my phone. Full signal. The time read 9:12 a.m. We had only been down there for a few minutes. Or so we thought. As we ran to the car, I noticed something. The trees. The leaves had changed, and snow covered the ground. Our car was half buried in frost. We checked the date when we finally reached town. November 17th, 2017. We had been missing for 2 weeks. We never went back. If you made it this far, you're braver than most. If these stories sent chills down your spine, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more terrifying tales. And don't stop here. Check out the videos on your screen for even more horror. Have you ever had a creepy experience of your own? Share your horror stories in the comments below. We'd love to hear them if you dare.